Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to our next episode of AI in Real Life. Our topic for today is how do you take a PRD and turn that into high-quality code? To help us walk through that today, we have Steedan in the studio. Steedan's a consultant here with EchoPoint with us, and he's helped tons of organizations figure out how you can build AI-native product teams. As for me, I'm your host, Mustafa Kapadia. I help CPOs build AI-native product teams just like Steedan, where we help them move faster, make better decisions, and improve impact. Steedan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mustafa. Good to be back.
Good. Steedan, if it's okay with you, let's just start with the basics, right? In your experience, how do most product teams and engineering teams go around turning PRD into code today? What's the normal process?
So this is still without AI. The process really is to work with your engineering team to break it down into requirements and tickets. I think most of us who have been on a team have experienced various stages of that process. It's fairly laborious. There's a lot of work to do to take a PRD and break it down to smaller requirements so we can build it. Unfortunately, what I see happening on the AI side of things is people are often taking PRDs and just shoving it into an AI tool to build it without getting that level of detail.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And I've had quite a few clients come to me and say, well, we've tried it. It usually doesn't work. I'm curious, in your experience, why does that not work? Intuitively, if you have a well-defined PRD and you put it into Cloud Code and you actually have all the right harnesses, why is it so hard to come out with quality code?
For most things that we're asking it to do, the PRD is very high level and usually encompasses a lot of different requirements and requests. And so there's a lot of detail, a lot of work that needs to get done to fulfill the PRD in its entirety. And for these AI tools, these coding tools, there's still a lot of planning. It's a lot of thinking, and it just can't manage that much context all at once.
There's too many assumptions that the AI has to take in order for it to deliver what you want it to deliver, right?
That's the thing too. You're giving it this, you're giving this really broad input and expecting it to fill in the gaps. And there's a lot that has to happen in between. And you don't really get a chance when you do that to interject and course correct along the way. And so you just end up with whatever it gives you. Sometimes you can get close and you can nudge it in the right direction and keep moving forward with it. But that's very tedious. It's a lot more work. We don't want to do that if we don't have to.
So now you took a very different approach, didn't you? Now you didn't just take a PRD and dump it into a large language model or a Cloud Code or whatever it might be and said, go build me code. Tell me about the approach that you took.
I definitely tried the other approach and it didn't get me the results I wanted. So I went back to first principles and thinking about how do we solve this problem now? And I took a very similar approach as to how we would work with engineers today. We break it down into requirements. I used AI to help me do that. Build out all the tickets, think through some of the solutions in the tickets and technical considerations that need to be made. And then I put those tickets into Linear. You could use Jira or another task board. And I'm managing all the tasks through there. And the agent is picking up items that are ready to be worked on from the task board. I'm not having to prompt it individually for each one.
So you're almost mimicking the same process that you would do prior to AI, right? You're taking PRs, turning into tickets, and that you would then give to your development team, and then you would actually turn that into code. Is that fair?
Very similar. Yeah, and an interim step in this that a lot of teams have taken is they still follow the same approach where they break it down into tickets, but then it's up to the engineer to go one ticket at a time, pull in the requirements, work with Cloud Code or another tool, complete the ticket, and then they would go get the next ticket. And for all intents and purposes, I've removed the engineer from that step, and now the agent is just going and getting the tickets on its own. Yeah. So there's definitely some considerations that need to be made when you're doing that, but it can be effective.
Now, I know that this is highly experimental and things that you've been playing around with, but can you show us what you've done, please?
Yeah, sure. And there's definitely teams that are doing this. Shopify released an article just the other day going in depth about how they're doing this type of automated agent coder. So here's the thing that I'm building. I'll show you this first, just so we have some context here. I don't particularly the N8N flow builder for building out automated agent flows and things like that. It's good, but it's a little too capable for some situations, and sometimes you just want something simple. So I was trying to build a simpler version of that. And so I started in Bolt just to get something close to what I wanted. And then I very quickly hit the limitations of Bolt. After a while, it's just started to grow into a bigger project. So I wanted to take it into a tool like Cursor or a Cloud Code I found out that OpenAI actually had a project called Symphony that could leverage Codex and Linear. Codex is Symphony's coding tool, or is OpenAI's coding tool. And so it's able to leverage Codex to do this development. I am working with Codex in this case, and I have some things that I want to improve in this application. So over here in Linear, I have a backlog of things that I want to work on. So one thing I want to build is a keyboard shortcut help panel, just so that I can make sure all the keyboard shortcuts are clear and they can all be managed. And so this is probably a fairly simple thing to build. It's not overly technical, but there definitely are some acceptance criteria we have to consider. So I broke it down into a ticket, just like if I was going to give it to a developer, and I used AI to help me do that. And now we have some really nice requirements here.
So let me step back. So you built an N8N clone, and in the clone, you want to be able to add this new feature about a keyboard shortcut. Yes?
Yes.
And what we're seeing on the screen here, is this your requirements, or is this a ticket that you created from the requirements?
This is a ticket that I created from requirements.
Okay.
There's lots of different ways to go about getting this. Depending on where you're using a solution like this, that might change. So I definitely had a PRD that had some enhancements I wanted to make to the application, and some of it came from there. And some of it was just chatting with AI. How can I improve this application? What kind of things am I missing? And then we started to build out some requirements there, as if it was a user giving me feedback about things that they didn't like about the application or they thought were missing.
So that's good, because I think that's the key step, right? It's the step in which you take the PRD and turn it into tickets is where most people are missing, because they just take the PRD and put it right in the LLM. And so now you create this ticket. Any particular format of the ticket that AI prefers?
Not necessarily. I take a similar approach I would with a human engineer. I give it a basic summary and acceptance criteria. Sometimes I will go a little bit more technical and tell it a specific library I want to use or a specific way I want to handle something if I think that's necessary. Generally, acceptance criteria. The thing with acceptance criteria, I think there's probably more emphasis on that than maybe there would be normally.
Yeah, it's definitely much more than what you would see in a typical user story, you know?
Yeah, and so it's a checklist for it to follow. And so one of the considerations to make is when you're working with an AI in this manner, you lose a lot of the back and forth compared to working with an engineer. If they have a question midway, it's hard for them to come in with an engineer, they could come in, they can ask you a question if they get stuck halfway through. And this is usually happening over the course of days. With the AI agent, it's not usually asking you questions, so it needs all the information right away. And it just runs with whatever's there. So what happens is it picks this up, it does a bunch of development, it pulls down your repo, does a bunch of development, pushes up a pull request, and then you get a chance to review it. And if it's wrong, you have to start the whole process all over again. So you want to make sure that you have as much detail as possible.
Because it forces you that you need to think all of these things up front before you give it to them. Or give it to them.
Traditionally, you might have a lot of holes in your thinking. Maybe you haven't fully fleshed it out, but it's okay. We'll work with the devs when they pick up the ticket and we'll figure it out then. Can't do that in this case. We have it figured out ahead of time.
You need to be tighter, and that's a different way of working, because it is, if you work with the development team, it's much more iterative, right? Yeah. Otherwise, you end up giving an incomplete ticket and then you spend more time debugging why it's not working.
Yeah.
All right, so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Where do you want to go next?
So I guess I can show you how it works and show it working away on something here. So I'm going to drag over the keyboard shortcut help panel, and I'll drag over the mini map. And so these are now in the to-do. And you'll see here shortly they'll move over to
in Linear, correct? Yes.
Yeah, I'm using Linear. So shortly it's going to move over to in progress. And there is a worker that I have running in the background in terminal. If you want, I can show that briefly as well.
Yeah, let me bring that.
I'll get that here. So this is the worker, and it's just monitoring Linear for potential work to do.
And this is in the Symphony that you're talking about that OpenAI just released. Yes.
Yeah, so this is Symphony, and it's an Elixir app that they built. They have some principles around how this should be done, and they built an Elixir app as an example. And so that's what I'm using here to test. Yeah. And you'll see here it's sitting for a while. It took a while for it to pick it up. This one's in progress now. So it's working on PET 23. I don't remember which one that is if I look at my board. That is the keyboard shortcut help panel. And then now it's picked up PET20 as well. And you can have as many agents.
These are both of the tickets you put into queue, and so it's now picking as well, right?
Yeah, it's picking them up.
So how would you describe Symphony? What is the key capability does it have?
Its key capability, I guess, is like a queue manager. It's really just managing the work to be done. It's relying on Codex to do a lot of the heavy lifting, but it's leveraging skills files and agent files and descriptions to do that. So it'll load in a skill file to get Codex to interact with Linear, for example. So the app itself isn't doing a whole lot of heavy lifting. It really is Codex that's doing most of the compute in the background.
Got it.
I'll just switch back over to Linear here again. And we'll take a look at one of these issues it picked up. So not that you're going to do this all the time, but the good thing is it is building out a plan. And so this is part of Symphony's concept around how things should be done. And it builds out a plan and it adds it to the ticket. And so here's the plan. You can see what it's done. You can see what it's going to do. Not that you would actually sit here and look at this throughout the day, but if you needed to go back and debug, diagnose why it made a decision, what happened, you can do that. And you get some notes here as well about potential issues it ran into or things it decided, and then confusions if it actually ran into an issue.
How detailed do you think this plan is? Because if you think about all the other tools that are out there, because now almost all the prototyping and coding tools will give you a plan.
Yeah, they all do for the most part. This is about the same as any other plan. Okay. Both comes up with a very similar plan on its internal tool as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. They're all using the same underlying LLM anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And so it pulled down the repo and it's copying my main branch, and it's used the skill to write the note, and then it's going to continue on at some of the actual coding work. It is slow. So one of the things I've noticed with this is compared to just working on Claude Code and doing it yourself one ticket at a time, this does take a while. And I do find it uses more tokens because it has to keep checking. Right? It has to pull in the plan and check the plan and use that context. And it's pulling in the context of all the skills it needs to use. And it's not sure. It doesn't know exactly where it's going to start in development either. Whereas like with Claude, I can say only work in this file and edit this JavaScript file, and it's going to do that. So it does use up quite a few tokens. And it does take a little bit longer. But for things like small improvements or bug fixes, you could have this kind of running in the background, just working away on things. So you refresh here and see how it's going. And so I only have 2 workers running. You could have 10 agents running and 10 tasks being done at a time if you wanted to. And so it's still going. Shortly, we should get a human
that's
review.
Fine. So while we're waiting for it to run, tell me, you kind of highlighted that you took the same approach that you would do with a developer in the loop, right? How did you come across that approach? Because that's not, did you try a whole bunch of different things that did or did not work before you landed on this one?
I think the main thing I tried was that kind of the one ticket at a time approach. I did realize fairly early on, I definitely tried dumping a PRD into something like Bolt and having it built. It didn't like the results it gave.
Tell me more.
It's interesting.
Tell me what was it if you just dumped it into some kind of a coding tool. Tell me what the results, or why you didn't like the results.
You were lucky if you got something that worked at all, especially when you're starting from scratch. You had to make a lot of decisions along the way, and there's a lot of things that ended up half built. Never really finished them, and they were there in principle, and maybe that's my fault because I wasn't specific enough and I didn't say just make this screen pop up when I click on this, and I didn't give it a lot of detail. So it built something that kind of approximated what I wanted, but it didn't go into a lot of detail because I didn't go into a lot of detail.
The other challenge, and you and I have talked about this too, is that even if it does write the code, you don't know how close that code is to the quality that you need it to be for your internal code quality bar. Correct.
Yeah, that can be a challenge with any of these tools. So I think a good example of that would be not just the quality, but even the design decisions or the coding decisions it's making. So even in this approach, if I don't explicitly tell it, hey, we have a library for drag and drop that we custom built, and here it is. Please use this library for the drag and drop builder. it's going to come up with its own solution. And you definitely run into that at the PRD level, but you can run into that in these situations as well. Whereas maybe you would have a developer who would think to ask, hey, do we have a library that does this thing already? Is there something we use elsewhere? Or should I find another one? And with a lot of these tools, they're just not going to ask you those kinds of questions.
And so you do have to build that context, or you do have to build that library or harness before you actually give it to one of these tools so they can follow the quality requirements that you expect.
Yeah, so with Symphony, there's a whole workflow document that comes with it, and you can add in additional rules and things like that as well. And so if you know those things in advance, you can tell it, just like working with Cursor, Cloud Code, these other things. So you can make rules to help with some of those things.
Yeah. What else did you try that didn't work? I know you tried both, because I know you and I both tried that before. Was there anything else? Because I know it took you some time to set this up.
Yeah. No, I ran into some challenges setting this up. I think a lot of it was really around permissions. You have to give it free reign on your machine. Otherwise, it runs into problems. It needs to be able to pull down a GitHub repo. It needs to be able to push a repo. You need to have your SSH tokens set up or use the GitHub terminal app for it to work. And it needs access to that. And so you run into some challenges there. Once I got it running, it was pretty good. Minus that I always get a little worried about how many tokens it's using in the background. I think last month I ate through 80% of my usage within 15, 20 minutes with Codex. So it eats at it pretty quick.
Do you think the token usage is predominantly because the plan is building and it keeps rewriting code? Or where do you think the most of the token usage is coming from?
From what I've been able to tell, a lot of it is it has to read a lot of your project every single time. We're not pointing it in a specific direction. If I was hand-holding it and building this out manually with the help of AI in, say, Cloud Code, I could point it at a specific file, and I could even point at a specific line within that file and say, add the code here and make it do what it needs to do. Also, the level of detail of the plan maybe could be a little bit smaller. Maybe I can break the whole thing up into smaller pieces even and go one line at a time if I wanted to. Obviously, that takes a lot more input for me, but it uses fewer tokens because I'm now making a lot more of the decisions along the way, whereas here we're letting the agent make most of the decisions.
But that's a good point, because I absolutely agree, because when you let the agent run wild or AI run wild, you never know what direction it's going to take, and it will end up using a lot of tokens. I was going to ask you another question, but I see that we've moved, at least one of them has moved from in progress to human review.
So let's take a look at what it did. I'll go over to GitHub here. And in GitHub, it actually generated a pull request. And here you can say keyboard shortcut help panel. So it gives you a summary in the PR of what it did. And it validated through lints, and it built it to make sure it compiled properly and there was no issues found there. I can look at how many commits there were. In this case, there was just one. And in the commit, I can do a diff, or I can look at the file changes as well. So here I can see all the stuff it wrote. I can review this, make sure that this is reasonable and what I wanted it to do. And then I can submit it and merge it into my code base. It's like working with a real developer in a lot of ways. The challenge in the part that I still trying to figure out is, what if I don't like what it did? What happens if I reject this PR? How does it handle that? From my experience, it goes back and it starts all over again. It'll look at its previous plan. It'll look at my comments, and it will try to consider that. But it takes a long time. And again, it uses a lot of tokens when it does that. One of the things I'm hearing, and I'm sure our viewers have probably seen comments on X and other social media platforms, that companies are spending an entire dev salary per dev just on tokens. I think that from my experience here, that's probably very likely the case.
Well, that's the thing. The more hands-off you are with AI, the more tokens it uses. Right? That's been our experience the whole time.
Yes, more tokens. But then also you got to think of the sheer volume. You don't have one developer carrying one ticket through at a time. You have 10, 20, 30 agents per developer carrying through dozens of tickets. And then you're just reviewing them. The throughput, the sheer amount of work you're able to accomplish in the same amount of time is much greater.
Yeah. So tell me more about the review, because now review becomes even more important, right? If somebody else is writing the code. When you
Yes.
took a look at it, how did you review it, or do you have a litmus test or a certain bar that you look at when you review the code?
In this case, I didn't take a very good look at it, but ideally, you should have a human in the loop reviewing every PR.
Yeah.
And in the case of Amazon, they run into some challenges a little while ago, and now they have a policy where a senior dev needs to review every PR. And that's the thing with reviewing PRs too, is if you're a junior dev reviewing a PR, you might not know what to look for. You might not know
Yeah.
what is going to be a problem in the future or potentially now. And so that's something that you learn over time. So having a senior dev review PRs, I think, is great. Also, having another agent do an initial review on the PR is becoming a very common approach. I don't have that implemented with my stack here right now, but that would be very advisable, I think, just to catch some obvious mistakes initially, at least.
At least for the initial, it's almost like you're doing some of your testing up ahead, right? And we haven't even talked about testing yet.
Yeah, you can build agents to do testing as well.
Yeah.
You can do automated testing. You can do end-to-end testing as part of your deployment process, as part of your PR process. There's lots of things you can implement through things like GitHub Actions to accomplish some of that, or even external tools.
Perfect. So tell me, Steedan, it of course looks great. Tell me where these things break down. These things are never perfect, right? And it took me a long time to set this up.
Yeah.
Tell me what doesn't work or where it's still fragile.
Here's a good example right here. It happened live. We have a merge conflict that we have to deal with. So when you have multiple agents working on the same area of code, you're going to get merge conflicts. And we can try to automatically resolve these, but we might have to interject manually and go in here and figure out where the conflicts are and which versions we want to keep. And then the hard part about that is I didn't write either of these versions. These were both PRs written by the agent, so I'm not sure which version I want to keep. I had to spend a little bit of time familiarizing myself with what was done recently and making a decision on that. And so that's definitely a challenge. It's hard enough when you have devs, but usually you only have a couple of devs working in an area at a time. And in this case, you could have 20 agents working in the same area. I think
they're all merging at the same time, and they don't know which one to believe.
They don't know. They pulled down the repo before the other one was merged in, and they don't know enough to go and rebase and pull down a more recent copy. They're not paying attention to that. And so that's going to happen more frequently than it normally would.
Yeah, and at a volume that most people are not used to, right? If you take the example of 20 agents, that's 20 potential merge conflicts.
And 20 agents working on potentially the same area code, ideally not. Ideally, you're managing that and you're making sure that you're working on a broad range of tickets that touch different areas so these agents aren't overlapping, but that's going to be hard to avoid. And so as a developer, you're going to spend a lot of your time reviewing agentic PRs and fixing merge conflicts.
I'm sure my developer friends would love that.
It's when I was a developer, I'm sure it was the one thing I really wanted to spend all my time doing. Not that you will spend all your time doing it, right? So I think having agents help you with these things is really important. Having agents do that first PR review is going to help with that, the burden of that a lot.
Yeah.
As a developer, you also get to spend a lot more time speccing things out too. So in the past, you might be speccing it out as you're building it. Now you're going to work ahead. You're more of an architect. You're thinking through the issues, and you're going to spend a lot more time speccing things out. For some people, a place they like to spend a lot of time anyway. So we'll be doing more of that too.
Now, what about the process itself? Because remember, we went through a whole step, right? You had a PRD that turned into a ticket. The ticket was put into linear. Symphony picked it up from linear and then put it into Codex. And then you actually were able to push into GitHub and then eventually to code, right? There's a lot of little chains back there, right? Tell me in the process itself where things start breaking down.
I don't know that that it breaks down. I think there's a lot of decisions to be made, and there's some pitfalls to avoid. And so one is you want to make sure that you're involved in all the decisions being made up until that point, that it becomes a ticket. You don't want tickets going in there that you've never looked at, that you don't know what they're about, what they're for. So you need to be involved in that process. There's definitely workflows that you can build out using things like NA to help you with some of these things, but you need to really make sure that you, like the development, you're stepping through one thing at a time. You also can't give the LLM a PRD and say, generate all the tickets for this. That also won't work.
Yeah.
You have to go through and figure out what are the core concepts I have here in this PRD and how does that break down from an architecture point of view. Here's our architecture, take this into account. And you have to step through multiple steps within a process to get to the point where you can create a ticket.
What was your step to create the ticket that you showed us? Because
So
I'm assuming you start with a fairly robust, excuse me, a fairly robust PRD, yes?
Yeah, so I showed Claude my application that I was building, and I had started to have a conversation with it about it to figure out what is the next stage here and what do I need to work on. And with the help of Claude, I built out a PRD. Then from there, I took that PRD and in multiple sessions, I tried to break it down into different components and features and groups of features that would accomplish what we were trying to do, essentially that epic. And there's something that didn't really fit into that epic. And so we didn't work on those. And then there was other things that I went deeper with it on, figuring out, okay, so if we build this, how does that impact these other issues? Are there other things we need to consider? What is the order of operations here? We figured that out in some of the dependencies. And so, yeah, I just workshopped it with Claude and came up with a plan, which at the end of the day, the plan was for that PRD, 15 different tickets we were going to do. And then I put the tickets into...
There's almost a case to be made that PRDs nowadays need to be much smaller and much more focused, right? It used to be that we used to have these large PRDs that had multiple features for an epic. And if you really are getting to this point at which AI can start taking parts of PRDs and turning into code, it's much better if the PRDs are much smaller.
Yes, there's definitely a case for that.
Definitely one feature as opposed to multiple features, and just focus on that. And then that one feature creates multiple tickets, and then you go from there, right?
Yeah.
So we're almost getting to the point at which that, and I know why PMs like to have large PRDs, because it actually is much easier to ship that way, right? But we may be getting to the point in which going micro might be a much faster way to go.
Yeah. But at some point we need to know where we're headed.
We're all just figure it out, right? I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. There's an art to the PRD to the ticket as well. It's not as simple as most people think.
Yeah, you had to manage scope really carefully, because even in that scenario, the LLM can struggle with having enough context about what it's doing. So if you try to throw too many things at it in a PRD. So yeah, keeping the PRD really focused does help. And
the other part is, we start off saying that the more buttoned up it is, the better it is for AI, because AI is not, at least at this point in time, going to mimic the same relationship that you have with your developer, in which they will ask a question that makes you think more, right? You almost have to do all of that thinking ahead of time. And by the way, you can use AI to the sparring. We use red teaming with our clients, and we use synthetic agents with our clients, or synthetic users to our clients, to help clarify our thinking better even before a PRD is created. And so all of that now relies on the PM doing all that work up ahead of time, as opposed to doing it along in the process. Yeah. Anywhere else this breaks?
I guess the other thing, not so much the process itself, but I think you start to run into some challenges when you're moving this fast. There's other challenges you're going to face. And so that's the thing that I don't think, we've not really seen the full effects of that yet. Yes, we can move faster. Does it mean we should move faster? Maybe we need to actually slow down a little bit more, spend a little bit more time thinking through what we're building. Building it happens a lot faster now. So definitely more emphasis on thinking about what we're building. The other thing that changes, so not something that breaks, but something that changes, is, do you have product managers going and speccing these things out and writing out the tickets and doing more of that work? Or do you have engineers taking over more of that work and doing more PM type work that traditionally product managers would do? The boundaries of roles
are definitely changing, shifting. 100%. And it just, I think, like you said, the nature of work is changing, right? Because how you write requirements and how robust those requirements are requires now a high level of specificity before you actually even do that. And the question is then, who is the one actually leading the effort? Does it still have the traditional handoff? maybe a softer handoff between PM and engineering? Or is it just a PM with a bunch of agents around, right? But then you definitely get into issues with code quality. Who's going to do the review? And so on.
Yeah, you still need
right?
someone to do the review.
Yeah.
And
This whole idea that it's going to eat away jobs, I'm still not convinced.
I think we're just going to build more stuff. I think that's the simple answer. Probably just going to build more stuff. Regardless of who does it, it's really important to spend time on that plan, especially taking this approach. Because once the agent takes that plan, that's it. It's a black box until you get that PR. And you can waste a lot of tokens. You can have it churning away, building a lot of stuff that's not going to work if you haven't built the plan right. And so that's where we have to put more time into planning. And we're saving.
I agree with you. I mean, the line of thought out there, which I don't agree with, is that the whole automated pipeline piece, right? You suddenly click one button, you put in some needs of, you put in some kind of user needs, and the LLM goes through a whole bunch of processes, and at the other end, with maybe a little bit of human oversight, you get some code, right? And people are trying to build that pipeline. You and I have had conversations about it. I'm like, you can build it. Doesn't mean that it's going to get great results at the end, right? Because of what you just said, is that there's a whole bunch of micro decisions that you have to make along the way. That if you don't have a human in the loop, you're basically letting AI overtake it. And I guarantee you AI is going to make the wrong decision 9 out of 10 times.
And I think there's a couple different approaches that we'll probably start to see take place when it comes to this. And so we know that we don't want to let an agent handle everything from idea to creation to testing to launching to marketing.
Yeah. You know, the clients who have actually tried it to see with such horrible results. And I'm like, yes, it's because it's fundamentally not, just because AI can do it doesn't mean that you should do it. Because at the end of the day, the quality is what matters. Right.
And so then the question becomes, do you need a human in the loop for the entire process, or do you just need a human at the end to catch all the bad stuff and filter that out and do quality control? Or do you need a lot of human input at the beginning to make sure it's perfect before you go into kind of mass producing whatever it is it's producing? If you look at assembly lines and how they can work, depending on the product and what you're producing, you might handle that differently.
It also depends on the type of code, because bug fixes have very different versus net new. And so the lanes that you move in, and we've talked about this, right? We have the speed lanes. The lanes you move in will require a different level of process, right? Bug fixes can move fast, right? I wouldn't say little oversight, but not as much. But then net new or new feature enhancements require a lot more, right? And I think that's where human creativity comes in, which I think is hard for us to replicate, or AI to replicate. Anyway, Steedan, last question. I love what you shared. I know it's still very much early stages, but tell me, what does this unlock for product organizations? What can they do now based on this?
There are some organizations doing this already. In a lot of cases, they've built out custom tooling earlier on to do this. And one of the scenarios you mentioned just a moment ago was bug fixes. This is a great opportunity to automate some of those bug fixes with very minimal oversight, and you can crunch through that backlog pretty quickly. So that's one. And then small feature requests. I think I can see this being useful for small little changes, improvements, things that maybe as a development team don't get prioritized as often, that are quality of life improvements, things that are going to make a big difference at the end of the day, that we just know are given that, that of course we would build that if we had time, but we don't. And now we can, right?
Yeah, I agree. And if you think about the outcomes, right? Number one, of course, it allows you to move faster, because now you can do so much more in the same amount of time with the same amount of capacity from a people perspective. But it also changes the way people work, because I think now you have to be more diligent up front and on the back end, right? So the way you end up spending time changes. This has been good, Steedan. This is fantastic. You and I have been trying to put this on the show, on the record for some time. So I'm glad we did it, because I know there's a bunch of people who are out there who have been interested in requesting this video. Thanks again for being here. We'll come back with another challenge for our next episode for AI in real life.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Steedan. Bye for now.
Thanks.